To file item 7, lead scientist report, Dr. Peter Goodwin. Welcome back to the United States.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chair Fiorini, and good morning, members of the Council. Firstly, I'd also like to welcome Jessica. Great to see you sitting next to you. I'm a little worried about how I've moved down the table. Is that so you can keep an eye on me? But congratulations, great to see you in the position. Also, just on behalf of the science community, I'd also like to acknowledge your Hank Nordhoff. If I could just expand a little bit on Chair Fiorini's comments. As we were going through the science plan development last year, both publicly in the meeting but also outside, clearly Mr. Nordhoff really understands big science. And I think there was that one document that he cited, 760,000 pages. Do you remember? But he really understands how you connect a diffuse science community around a common theme, and we hope that certainly some of his big suggestions there he sees reflected in the plan. Okay, and then also as another comment before I get into the report. With the online journal, I think we should really acknowledge Sam Luoma and the staff, because clearly any editor journal has that responsibility of the control and quality control, and I think Dr. Luoma has just done a fantastic job in making it accessible. The readership's going up. People are choosing to publish there because of the rapid turnaround time and getting information out. And I think that the Council's suggestion to have these online essays is a superb way of you expressing diverse opinions, particularly on how science and policy interface. Okay, with the report, I'd just like to give an overview to see if your report is fitting what you'd like to hear. I think both collectively and individually when we've chatted, you've mentioned that it's a little like sitting in front of a fire hose when the science comes out, and we do try and be selective in what we're telling you about and what's happening in the science scape. So if there are things that are going on that are not reflected in the lead scientist report that you would like to hear about at any time, please you let us know. Our job here is to try and bring those issues to the forefront for you. And so what you'll see is that the reason science is so pervasive, of course, that the governor's statement with the Obama administration a couple of years ago that we're moving ahead with science as our guide. So science is just pervasive right across all of the activities. And under the Delta Reform Act, of course, best available science is also appears throughout. And also we're charged in both the Delta Plan and in the Delta Reform Act to regularly consult with other agencies, and the number of times in the Delta Plan, the Delta Science Plan, with others. And so you'll see a lot of these activities are really part of the science community. So with the lead scientist report, you'll see it's divided into 3 sections that we'll follow. The first one is the scientific review activities or exploratory workshops. This is part of that definition of best available science. And these reviews are often, people really pay attention to them, so we'll try and get you the important message out of each of these reviews as they come. Secondly, under the work with others, we lump things under collaborative science activities, so you can see what's going on, not just through the Council, but how the science community is pulling around various issues. And the third part of it is linked under your science communication and meetings. So that's an overview. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that a lot of what we do is driven by the Delta Science Plan, of course, that you received and was finalized on December the 30th of last year. There's 2 really big things going on under that. The first is the Interim Science Action Agenda, which Jessica mentioned a moment ago. And you're going to hear a lot about that through Lindsay and others tomorrow. The other big activity the Interim Science Action Agenda is basically the work plan. What's everyone doing? How does it fit together? The second big activity we've got going is the State of the Bay Delta Science, which is basically a statement of where are we at right now. So if we're moving through this paradigm of the Delta Plan, where are we actually starting from? And Lauren Hastings and Darcy Austin from the USGS are leading that effort. So you'll be hearing more about these in the coming months. So going to the items in front of you, the first item here comes directly from the Delta Plan. Under ERR1, it says that we or update the State Water Resources Control Board's Delta Flow objectives. And under that item, the State Board directed their staff to work with the science program to host 2 workshops earlier this year. The first of the workshops was looking at delta outflows and related stresses that occurred in February this year. The second one occurred in April, and that's related on interior flows and related stresses, as you'll see in the first 2 items there. There's web links there for you to go and see the charge to the panel, who was on the panel, the presentations. And under these workshops, what the board staff asked us to target on, without going through the whole charge, is basically what's new. What new scientific information should they be considering as they move ahead around these issues? Sam Harada is our lead science program on that, and of course he's got had a very, very close relationship with the State Board for many years. The process there, if you're wondering how we put it together, again in the science plan you'll see in one of the appendices how we actually go about structuring these workshops and review panels. It's actually a very formal process which we go through. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time other than to let you know that we thought in June we would come back, and we have the first report already. I think the report, it's fair to say, was much more than we expected. It was a 76-page report. I would encourage you to take a look at it if you really want to understand some of the history and the thinking behind the full X2 standard. The panel really did a nice job in going back to the start and describing the history, where the weaknesses are, where some of the strengths are. And they also threw out some new ideas and concepts for both the State Board and the science community in general to contemplate. We hope to receive the second report sometime in June, in time for the next board, but last time with these panels they're grappling with really big issues, and the panel had asked for an extension because they wanted to get things right rather than having dissenting opinions and things like that. But currently I think we are on track to have that second report by the next meeting. Are there any questions on those State Board workshops?
No.
So now we'll jump into some of the collaborative activities. The first issue there is known as the CARBA seminars. Here we have a program where we host jointly with the Center for Aquatic Biology and Aquaculture at UC Davis. And you may wonder, where do these topics come from? The meeting which we have just had was titled Emerging Techniques to Quantify the Effects of Environmental Change in Bay Delta Organisms. And how these topics are selected, sometimes it comes, in some instances, from you, the Council, or the request of other agencies. But also the topics are selected as bottom-up. Basically, the scientists say there's some really interesting things going on around this topic and we'd like to know more about it. And this was the instance of this last CARBA seminar, where there's some very new techniques being applied through UC Davis and other researchers. And this was an opportunity for those researchers to lay out the technologies and how they might be applied to the Delta. Typically, these activities get 200 or more scientists will show up to listen and participate. And the staff people working on that is Garrett Lyle and Marina Brand. So again, the web link is there if you want to, it's webcast, it's archived, so you can go back and use that as a reference for the future. So please interrupt me if you have any questions. The next item on the agenda is the Science Steering Committee. And this was called for, if you recall, in the Delta Science Plan. This was something we heard from the scientific community as a whole. They saw this as a very useful advisory group. And we like the concept because when we're being told by the Delta Reform Act to work with others, this is a way of outreaching to the science community. But I'd like to just explain what the role of this group is. We already have the Independent Science Board. We have the National Academies coming in and doing periodic reviews. And that is really oversight groups. The purpose of the Science Steering Committee is you're very different. First of all, they're not the best scientists from each agency. So this is not a group that is representing every agency or every interest group out there. This is a group of people who are recognized as scientific leaders in their scientific discipline. So this has nothing to do with the getting representation from groups. This is about getting the scientists around the table. And these are the local experts. They're not there to provide oversight. They're there really, if you like, to be a sounding board. And certainly in the Delta Science program with a small group, we cannot pretend to be experts in everything or even track everything that's going on. And we see this group as helping to be more efficient. So everything we do is totally open and transparent, of course. But when you pull large groups of folks together, we want to be efficient of those people's time. So being able to tap out to the leaders of the science community in different disciplines, they can help focus the discussion, give us the starting point to be more efficient of larger groups. It's also a group that when we get involved in some of the synthesis activities that the National Academies, you were so adamant about getting a handle on, are we looking at the right topics? So do we have the right focus? Are the right people at the table? Are we missing anyone from this very, very diverse scientific landscape? So this is the idea of it. In addition to that, we would like this group to comment on the interim science action agenda and the state of the Bay Delta science. Again, early input, are we doing the right thing before we put it out to a much larger group? So again, it's around efficiencies. So the first meeting which we had on Tuesday was really to focus on the charge. It's described in general terms in the science program. Marina Brand, who's the staff person, who's the interface with the Science Steering Committee, has spent a lot of time fleshing out that in more detail, and the purpose of the meeting was to go to a preliminary group of scientists to say, does this make sense? Is this what you were asking for in the Delta Science Plan? Where that sits right now is they gave us some great comments on the science action agenda and the state of Bay Delta science. And we asked them to reflect, as this came at most of them cold, we asked them to think about the discussion and to get comments to us by close of business on Friday tomorrow. And then we'll be reworking the draft charge. So that's where that group sits. Are there any thoughts or questions?
Questions of Peter?
Just
Gloria?
some thoughts. First, let me commend you for your outreach. I think it's very important to bring the science community and other entities into the collaboration effort in terms of what you're doing. The steering committee, I heard you mention that you also have asked local scientists to be a part of that steering committee and others. And I think just the collaboration with UC Davis, I think the fact that you've held 2 workshops with the state board is important. So I just think the whole process that you've included in terms of your charge is really important, because it says that you've brought in everyone, all the stakeholders from the science community and others, to develop the plan. So I think that's really important, the outreach that you're doing. And again, I heard you say something about we're not all experts, even scientists in every area. So when you bring in other scientists to discuss and to tap into new ideas and some of the new things that are going on in the science community, I think it's very important. So I just really wanted to comment and commend you on your efforts in bringing together everyone with this very important part of the plan. So thank you.
Well, Thank you for that support and kind comment.
Sure.
Okay, so the next topic on here, I think, is really exciting and visionary, and I'd like to just spend a few minutes on this, and I'd like to commend both you, Rainer, and George Isaac, you who've been leading this effort for the Delta Science Program. And again, when we talk about doing things with others, I think this is going to be just a terrific event. So without preempting, the web link is there, but I'm sure you're all aware that we are truly entering a new dimension of science. And this is that we're moving into an era of big data. And this big data is opening new opportunities about how we interact, how we view things. And so you'll often hear big data as the new statistics. It's a new branch of science. There's experimentation, there's statistical analysis, there's modeling, and now there's big data. And why this is so critically important for the Bay Delta issue and what you're faced in making decisions is that we know this is a rapidly changing system. You just some of the studies that the BDCP science team has put out that you're going to hear later today. The only certainty about the system you're dealing with is that it's changing, and it's changing rapidly. Secondly, with issues like climate change and many other things within the system, we can no longer rely on the traditional scientific method of looking back into the past and then using the past to predict the future. So we need to be adopting new techniques, and those new techniques are coming in part through these new data streams. So we're going to be using new technologies. Data is going to be becoming faster, more readily available to really study things and to help make almost real-time, on-the-fly management decisions. And I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes. The science program in the last couple of weeks have been interfacing with NASA Ames, and Councilmember Roostaller, I know this is close to your heart on your remote sensing of invasive species. Also at JPL, we have a couple of science fellows working there, and you've been following the methylmercury concerns about habitat restoration. One of the science fellows that you're supporting is actually looking at remote sensing technologies for actually being able to measure methylmercury remotely. So what a real-time management tool that's going to be potentially. So things are just changing very quickly. And many state leaders, John Marshak of the Water Quality Monitoring Council, Carol Larson at the State Board, many others have recognized this. And so the question is that with these big data streams, and everyone's been looking at how we manage that data, how we process the data and make it available to managers in a very quick and effective manner. And there's some terrific things going on. So we're partnering with all of these folks, and San Francisco Estuary Institute. I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Tony Hale in particular, who's been instrumental in helping us in the planning of this. And so the purpose of this workshop that you're going to hear next week is looking at how do we ensure that all of these initiatives that are being done for different purposes talk to each other in the future. And we're not at a point where 5 years from now we're having to do a $20 million fix. Secondly, many of these initiatives that are really absolutely cutting edge, and I won't list them now, but they're all grant funded. So what happens in 3 years, 5 years when the grant funding goes away? So we're going to be looking at the sustainability of these technologies. And so the organizing committee are doing two things. It's a 2-day workshop. The first day is going to be presentations. The presentations are going to be webcast. And the organizers have done a terrific job. We really have global leaders in this field coming in to give talks. And in addition to that, we've got the major programs which are currently underway in California also talking about their programs. And on the evening of that day, there's going to be a mixer where there'll be a few presentations from the private sector, state agencies, NGOs, but an opportunity for people just to get together and talk informally. On the second day, key folks from across the state and the outsiders are going to try and develop a white paper that will be a vision. Where does California want to go with big environmental data? Because there's a lot of large initiatives going on nationally. So we hope that this will be a vision statement where we want to be and how we interface with what's happening at the national level and the global level. So I'd like to finish that topic with just saying great job to Rainer and George and all of the many, many people on that organizing committee, and I think it's going to be a great event next week. Hopefully I've convinced you all to at least tap in on the webcast. Now, science communication, I'll just go through these very quickly. The Bay Delta Science Conference. This is a conference that's held every other year. Marina Brand is the staff lead on that. For those of you who are listening in or members of the audience, please get your abstracts in by June the 11th. Typically, there's 1,000 or more people show up to this meeting. In some respects, it's fairly unique, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, in that it does pull together managers, scientists. We hope to have some staff as from the state legislature. It's a great opportunity just to come along and interface. The organization of the conference traditionally has always been primarily volunteers. We have a planning committee and a program committee. It's a huge time sink. People will put many, many weekends over the coming months into the organization of this. So I'd really like to thank both of the committees, particularly the chairs. And the theme of this conference this year is essentially what's new, what's exciting, what's going on. And secondly, the underlying theme is in this era of collaborative science, which is being fostered by the agencies, how is science actually done? So you're going to see some very interesting ideas and formats in the conference that the planning committee has been working on. So, interestingly, just one other comment. When we were putting the science plan together, we had a Friends of Science meeting where we had a couple of people from DC. And they said the extraordinary thing about our conference when they were there is he had just come from another big ecosystem restoration conference. And he said that there they actually asked the managers, did you enjoy the conference? They said it was great, but there was absolutely nothing I could use in my day-to-day stuff. And he contrasted this conference because the focus here is on actionable science. How do you gear the science towards some of the challenges the managers face? So that's coming up. And the last...
Peter, could you give the date? It's later in the...
I do. It is the 28th to the 30th of October. And it's here, I should have mentioned, Sacramento Convention Center just down the road. So please put it on your calendar. You're very welcome to drop by any of the sessions.
I attended the last one and didn't understand about half of what I listened to, but it was it was great. It was great.
Yeah,
I'll pick up the other half of this year.
Yeah. Well, actually, Jessica just said if that was last year's conference, we alternate with the estuary conference, so maybe that 50% was on the bay. 2 years ago.
Here in Sacramento.
Okay. But please show up if it isn't understandable or you can't see the application. You please ask that question, because if we're not being clear with the messages, that's...
No, it was great. I enjoyed it.
Can you repeat the date again? October 28th through the
28th to the 30th.
Okay.
And Peter, I believe it coincides with our regularly scheduled monthly council meeting, and in support of the importance of this, there is an effort underway to try and schedule a meeting room at the convention center for the council meeting so that we can easily access the proceedings.
Perfect.
Good idea.
Thank you. Okay. The last thing here is State Scientists' Day. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge you Garrett Lyle and our state fellows, Jennifer and Mei Ling, and many others from the science program who drifted in and out. And it was pretty amazing to see folks walking around, little kids with 1 Delta 1 Science badges. But I think just seeing the smiles of some of the the young students who walked away from the table, great job, Garrett, and the other science program people were there. You could see the next generation of budding Bay Delta scientists. So I think that was all there. I'd like to invite Mei Ling, if you'd like to come down for by the numbers, and then if there were other questions that you had, Chair, we could go to that after by the numbers.
Yes, great. Thank you, Peter. Mei Ling, welcome.
Thank you.